Greetings from Castle Goring, from Mickey, Aurora, and from me. Well, I gather there have been problems with the sound, and I hope that it is now sorted out. Fingers crossed. And without further ado, with Aurora's encouragement, I am going to plunge right in, because we have some rather interesting ground to cover today. And one could almost say some of it is celebratory, because the forces of silence are being challenged, and they are having to scurry back under the rock whence they came. So, but let me not anticipate. Let me actually just dive right in with ARO23, who says, oh, ARO, is that a rotten oik, or is that a royal? Let's stop right there. It's most likely just a coincidence. Lady C, 2 questions, if you please. What do you make of Harry losing his court case? And second, and what about Diana lying on her first job application? Well, okay. Harry's latest challenge has been thrown out by Mr. Justice Lane, who has definitively stated, notwithstanding the attempts by Harry and his legal team, including David Sherborne, to present the failure as impartial success. Mr. Justice Lane has made it absolutely clear that Harry has definitively and comprehensively been trounced. No amount of face-saving claims can snatch the pretense of victory from the yawning jaws of defeat, of such a comprehensive defeat. Oh, poor H. Aurora, come and let's cuddle. I need to have empathy for H in his loss. And H has said that he might appeal the rejection of his right to appeal. Well, I'm sure David Sherborne isn't going to mind the fact that Harry is going to be lining his pockets yet again on this noble quest for international protected person status. Because, remember, I didn't choose to be born as a prince, and I'm supposed to milk it for all it's worth, and you oiks are all supposed to pay. Yes, Meghan me, not even Meghan I, Meghan me. We know that you're supposed to pay for us, because we are the greatest things on earth. Doria, bring some more weed. I feel I'm about to crash. Well, Aurora has left the sofa, so maybe, Aurora, since you're halfway through to the kitchen, you can go and get some Coke, so that we can make sure that we are in a sufficiently elevated frame of mind to conduct this broadcast. Shall we put it that way? Because nothing makes a girl feel better than Coke. And in fact, fun and joke aside, Coca-Cola is the best thing for you when you have an upset stomach. My brother-in-law, who's a very fine doctor, has always said it. And in fact, the other evening when my plane was so late, the only thing that kept me from falling asleep behind the wheel, because I left my car in the meet and greet station at the airport, which is very convenient. You drive there, dump the car, come off the plane, pick up back the car, and drive back home. All very effortless. You don't need to wait for taxis. You don't need to wait for trains. Everything is just smooth as silk. And how did I keep awake in the middle of the night? By drinking a Coca-Cola. So we need to always remember that Coke has its purposes. So that's the first part of the question. And the second part of the question is, and what about Diana lying on her first job application? Well, you know, as Andrew Morton quoted her brother Charles saying in Diana, her untrue story, which was published several months after my book, Diana in Private, in 1992. Andrew quoted Charles Spencer saying that one of their teachers at school said, "Oh, Diana Spencer," or words to this effect, "I do wish you'd stop telling so many lies." Lying came very easily and naturally to Diana. And to an extent you can see why, because she witnessed the most awful traducing and depriving of the rights of a mother that it is possible to witness in the divorce case, where her maternal grandmother backed up her father, notwithstanding the fact that her mother was suing for divorce on the grounds of cruelty. Cassius Clay, here we come, if you get my drift, this being YouTube. Well, Diana was 17 years old. She wanted a job, and she did what many people do. She figured if she applied for the job with her true age, she would possibly not get the work, while if she fudged the issue just a bit by saying she was born in 1960 instead of 1961, she would most likely get all the jobs she wanted. And she was absolutely right. She did. Diana was very shrewd. You know, when people say that, oh, Diana was an innocent, Diana was never an innocent. Never. You don't go through the traumatic childhood that she went through and be an innocent. Well, not if you survive, and she certainly survived very well, because she ended up being the Princess of Wales, all thanks to her initiative and determination and playing the game well. Diana knew how to play the game, and it was an innate gift or characteristic, whichever one you want. So she had this contract with Solve Your Problem Limited, which was run by a lady who had been, if I remember correctly, a Portuguese countess. And it was a very pucker sort of company for childcare, household problems, you know, whatever. I mean, there were some of them around. The one I used to use was John's Personal Services. These were, I don't know that anything like that exists now, but they were very, very pucker, and they provided the most wonderful service, and you could get practically anything you needed from very reputable and reliable people. And whatever Diana's failings, Aurora's fur, it's nothing else. Aurora's fur has been drifting by my nostrils. So she filled out this form, and it's now up for sale because it ended up in the hands of some people who have put it up on Actionium Limited in Bristol, which is an auctioneer's. And this is what the auctioneer Andrew Stowe had to say about the inaccurate entry of her birth date. Our client has always been told that this was done deliberately in order that Diana would appear older and therefore more likely to secure a job with the agency, or at least a higher rate of pay. I want to point out that all her references cleared. So did they know? I'm not sure that they would have known. But nobody seems to have been asked what her true age was. And all the references meant that she was immediately cleared for all sorts of work, which she got. And according to Mr. Stowe, this is an incredibly important piece of history. Well, I think that's over-egging the pudding. I think it is a very nice footnote to history, but I wouldn't have said it's an important piece of history, much less an incredibly important piece of history. But it certainly is a nice nugget. Getting your first job is a big moment in anyone's life, let alone when that person becomes one of the most famous figures of the 20th century. Here we have a teenage Diana Spencer, freshly moved to London, trying to find her way in life and applying for her first job. It's so human, so real, so normal. Well, they expect the application form to go for around £5,000. It might well sell for well over that. But it's certainly human. Obviously, it's real. Is it normal for everybody to lie on their business applications, their job applications? I'm not so sure about that one. However, Donna Dwignan says, now that Hugh Grant has settled against the Sun, do you think Harry will as well? Well, it's useful to know what has happened with Hugh Grant and newsgroup newspapers who published The Sun, because this was a lawsuit that sought to overturn statutes of limitations and expected to re-examine an issue that has already been examined, dealt with, and the problems have been solved. And may I make the point that Hugh Grant is figuratively in bed with, I think his name is Dan Evans of Byline Times, who has a conviction for being one of the biggest hackers of all times. So, on the one hand, you have them saying they want to clean up the system, which has already been dealt with in the Leveson inquiry and has been cleaned up. And all the abuses don't exist anymore. And if their action had succeeded, it could have resulted in the destruction of the newspapers concerned, their financial destruction, and following their financial destruction, their actual destruction. Now, when the law is used to not only pillory but destroy organs and institutions that are here to protect the civil liberties of people, irrespective of the abuses that have taken place in the past. As long as they are not taking place in the present, those institutions deserve to be protected against the encroachments of the Hugh Grants, David Sherbornes, and Harrys of this world. David Sherborne, with the assistance of Hugh Grant and Elton John and Prince Harry, managed to gather up some 40 claimants to sue the news group newspapers, alleging unlawful information gathering and invasions of privacy. And the trial was scheduled, and still is, incidentally, because not everybody has settled, for January 2025. Well, Mr. Grant claims that he was targeted by journalists and private investigators working for The Sun, who, incidentally, I've said this before, and I'm going to say it again, I was informed during the last round of the Leveson inquiry, I think it was called the Wheating. Anyway, whatever it was called, it's so long ago I don't really remember. But I certainly remember the conversation with this chief inspector who rang me up trying to get me to join forces with Hacktoff and Hugh Grant and all of them who were trying to institute privacy laws in this country. And I said, no, I wouldn't. Well, obviously, the information gathering that we were all subjected to at the time was illegal, but it's not anymore. And that's the material point. Well, Grant claimed that the private investigators and journalists gathered material, including burglaries to order, the breaking and entering of private property, in order to obtain private information through bugging, landmine tapping, phone hacking, blah-de-blah-de-blah. This has all been established before. So revisiting it to get it reopened was clearly an attempt to either destroy the newspaper companies, weaken them so much that they would therefore thereafter be terrified of any claims, or in the alternative, just bringing in privacy laws, not through statute, but through legal precedent. So anyway, on Wednesday, he settled, claiming that he was forced to settle because the rules of civil litigation meant that even if he had been awarded damages, as long as it was a penny less than the settlement offer, he would be liable for the legal costs of both sides. Well, that's how the system works. I'm going to explain the system after I've read out his comment. As is common with entirely innocent people, do take out the violins. He was so innocent that his exposure had nothing to do with Divine Brown's mouth being clamped where it shouldn't, and resulting in him being arrested and prosecuted in the United States of America. Nothing to do with the British, incidentally. As is common with entirely innocent people, they are offering me an enormous sum of money to keep this matter out of court. Well, what he regards as an enormous sum of money is either not my idea of an enormous sum of money, or then he's bigging up himself, which I wouldn't be surprised about. Anyway, I don't want to accept this money or settle, then don't, sweetie pie, don't. I would love to see all the allegations that they deny tested in court. Rupert Murdoch's lawyers are very expensive. And of course, David Sherborne isn't. No, not at all. He does it for charity. So even if every allegation is proven in court, I would still be liable for something approaching £10 million in costs. I'm afraid I am shying at that fence. Well, he's right to shy away from that fence. There, he's right. And yes, that is the legal system. And it's called a payment into court. And he realized that he was going to lose. So he's taking the money. He says he didn't want to settle and didn't want the money. Well, Mr. Grant, if you don't want the money, why don't you donate it to a worthy cause? Why don't you do something from the Baku people who have been so tremendously made to suffer by the very entities that your colleague and good friend and companion in shutting down freedom of the press, Prince Harry, is involved with and is doing a severe Pontius Pilate. Baku, what are the Baku people? What? Never heard of it, never heard of it. African parks. So, he, of course, really is admitting that they were trying to use the courts to have a public lynching of the newspapers to the detriment of freedom of speech in this country. Well, and in the process, they were going to be abusing the court process. The court process is not a platform for vain actors who were caught with elements of their body in orifices that they had no business being in public. Let's remember that. Hence, where all of his desire for privacy has started. It is an abuse of the court system to use the courts as a platform, as a vehicle for driving, and I'm mixing my metaphors and I really shouldn't, but so let's stop mixing. As a vehicle for driving your agenda, for censoring free speech in this country, and for destroying the very platforms which, even when they are subject to abuse, do nevertheless protect the citizens of this country. He's done the right thing. He can write a book about it. If it's all true, let him write a book about it. Let him go on television. Let him go on the BBC, ITV. I mean, he's a great friend of Harry and Meghan's, in quotes friend. They're all using each other. And I'm sure Dame Caroline McCall will have an awful lot of sympathy for him and put him on ITV constantly as he bitches about how tremendously unfair the press were to actually report on the fact that his organ was being played upon by somebody who didn't know how to actually pump a church organ, but knew how to pump his Grant-like organ, if you appreciate the relevance of the comparison. Vivian Howe says, Harold and his law team, headed by David Sherborne, who actually told the judge they hadn't lost, show their absolute disdain for the British public for this fiasco. Well, yes, Mr. Justice Grant went to some lengths to point out that Harold lost that case comprehensively. David Sherborne is well known in the legal world for his ability to use words to paint pictures, and he does it very well. He does it brilliantly, actually. He just doesn't always do it with real justice in mind. Unless, of course, real justice is spelled pocket, P-O-C-K-E-T. In particular, David Sherborne's pocket. Debbie Innes says, Lady C, I wanted to ask you if we can read anything into Harry changing his country of residence to that of the USA, as reported by Jack Royston at Newsweek. He said it was shown up today on Company's House. Well, I haven't checked it out and prepared to accept that this is a fact. If it's not, it's not important enough, because the principle is what counts in this instance. And if he hasn't done it, he hasn't done it. And if he's done it, he's done it. And evidently, Jack Royston does have an in with Harry and Meghan. So I suspect that maybe it's accurate. The law where Councillor of State is concerned is not residency, it is domicile. Harry ceases to qualify as a Councillor of State if he is not domiciled in this country. There is a huge difference under English law between your country of domicile and your country of residence. By saying that he has changed his country of residence to the United States, he is simply asserting a fact. Yes, it does affect him in many ways, shapes, and forms. It means that under the double taxation treaty, if there is a shortfall, it is now in his disfavor where Uncle Sam is concerned. Of course, if there's not a shortfall and he's quids in because of the change, and remember, I've been saying all along, there's a lot less money that Harry and Meghan are playing with than people seem to realise. It's between 9 and 11 million that has been floating around for the last several years, as is revealed in their Archewell, or Archewell, or however they want to pronounce it. Or I should say mispronounce it, because the name is Archewell correctly. And he might well, because Meghan's there's no trick in the book that Meghan doesn't know about. And you can depend on it that's why they have those 27,000 Delaware companies. And I'm not knocking them for getting very good expert tax advice and maximizing their income. But it does beg the question, who are they to be preaching to anybody about anything when they are using the system to minimize their contribution to the state? Let's think of it in those terms. Otherwise, it makes no difference. And the king has made absolutely sure that Harry will never be called upon to serve as a councillor of state, irrespective of whether he qualifies as one or not. So, I hope that answers the question. Pierre Onofri says, well, if Netflix is trying to regain popularity, in my opinion, they picked the wrong topic, especially since many people follow polo, and after finding out that Harry rides those ponies very hard and has actually killed one that was pregnant, also killing the little one she was carrying, I think if they choose this documentary, they will again be choosing and having a loser on their hands. There have been some very disturbing photographs making the rounds of Harry on a polo pony, which is clearly wounded by the extremities that he went to with his spurs. There is also the story of the polo pony that was pregnant and collapsed and died. I don't actually know why any responsible owner of a polo pony, or any horse indeed, would be allowing it to be played while it was pregnant. I make that point for what it's worth. And I don't even want to go there. I think the whole thing is so just dreadful. And whether he rides the horses too hard or not, polo is a very elitist sport. It is one of the most elitist sports in the world. And I want to make a point. I said some time ago that I had been told that Harry was trying to drum up very grand people who would be playing polo with him. Clearly, that was going to be at Wellington, because that is evidently where the majority of the action and the focal point is in his Netflix series. Well, polo is dead boring to look at, even when you are literally in bed with somebody who, I should rephrase that, who is playing polo and with whom you are often literally in bed. It's still Yawnsville. It's as bad as American football and rugby. And I speak from experience on those subjects. It's going to have absolutely no popular appeal whatsoever. They were not able to get any of the grand polo players that they wanted. I told you this months ago, that I had been told that Harry was approaching people and they had turned him down. I didn't say who they were, but I did indicate, and they were of a very grand background and rank. All turned him down cold. That might have given some glamour. Nacho Figueras and Harry, give me a break. Who gives a continental damn about them? I mean, really. And as for Meghan's series, I'm going to teach you how to cook jam. Well, I've made jam before. We used to have damson trees and plum trees, and I mean, they would just, the fruit would fall on the ground. So I'd go and I'd pick it up and I'd be looking at television or speaking to a friend and getting rid of the seeds, and then you have to boil the jam, put in the setting agent, which is a type of sugar, and you have to keep it for a certain time, and it's a long and arduous process. Do we think Meghan herself is going to be going through the whole thing, or is she going to do what she did with Spotify? Oh, well, you can interview them, and I'll just pretend that I did. This jam's bubbling up. Oh, Mr. DeMille, I'm ready for my close-up. Yes, I am. That, again, I am told, is Netflix's way of winding them down gently. The only thing that is keeping Harry and Meghan from being pitched out on their posteriors. Remember the word, you remember what a jackass is? Well, let's stick to the second syllable, because that's what I was told, that the only thing that is preventing them from being pitched out of the second syllable of jackass is the fact that they have a cordial relationship with Ted Sarandos, and he is married to a woman of color, and they are very invested in seeing other women of color flourish. And I was also told that his wife, who is very eminent and very capable, also doesn't want to be accused by the Black sisterhood of not doing everything to save the sister that Meghan is. So that's why they have been kept on, evidently, and that's why they are being wound down gently. But when these two shows tank, as everybody expects them to, they will then quietly do a Pontius Pilate, unless they can come up with a winning formula, which so far has eluded everyone, because Netflix and Spotify also, they spent a considerable amount of money in trying to develop projects with Harry and Meghan, all of which have either failed or, in the case of the Netflix series, succeeded only because of the sensational, and it now emerges, factually inaccurate presentations, which they can't go there again. People wouldn't tolerate it. You know, evidently, Harry's series is being produced by Boardwalk Pictures. So Harry and Meghan aren't even producing anything. I mean, they will obviously have their names on the credits, which will hook them legally, as has happened with the Netflix and the Samantha case. But there's that. It's nothing to do effectively with Harry. It's been farmed out. And as for Meghan's, it's a branch of Sony Pictures called the Intellectual Property Corporation. And Meghan's series, they claim, is being curated by her. Curated. A curator is somebody in a museum who takes care of the treasures and makes sure that they are well protected. I don't know what that tells you, but I know what it tells me. And we will end with Gwen B. Russell, who says, Katie Couric has stated in an interview recently, which is receiving much criticism, that she believes the jealousy and envy of the successful elite is the motivator of those who oppose the Biden administration and support Trump. I'm not concerned about the politics, but I certainly object to her egotistical description of herself and others of her persuasion. She is in the Aspen Institute along with Prince Harry. Do you think this is the ego behind taking away our freedoms? Well, Gwen B. Russell, they know better than you. They know better than me. They know better than everybody who disagrees with them, even if it's someone of kingly rank. What does that strike you as, if not rampant egotism? And, you know, Katie Couric, who has interviewed me in the past and who I rather liked at the time, is showing herself to be an egotistical yesterday's woman who is clearly overimpressed with herself. And yes, she earned the degree of renown that she possesses. And she needs to appreciate the fact that a bit of humility will possibly preserve her from dissipating the regard that people have for her. That the arrogance and overweening egotism that she is displaying will not have. Just because people don't support the Biden administration doesn't mean that they are envious of the entitled elite. Is she saying that the only people who support Trump are delusional trash, and that anybody who doesn't support Biden is delusional trash, and that if you don't support Biden, you are not only delusional trash, but you are also envious of the success of the entitled elite? Trump has many well-placed backers and supporters. Why would they be supporting him if they are jealous of the successful elite? They are also members of the successful elite. I mean, it's not even logical what she's saying. It's arrogant, it's impertinent, and it's illogical. And it shows that she is truly deluded. jealousy and envy of the successful elite. And I'm not saying that there isn't jealousy and envy of people who are successful or people who are well placed. I've been well placed and successful far longer than she has been. So I think I'm actually in a better position to address the issues on that subject. And I can tell you something, that yes, envy does exist, but it doesn't necessarily exist from those who have less than you. It often exists from those who have as much or more, or are in the same category but have a bit less than you. So to dismiss a whole class of people or several classes of people as being jealous and envious just because they don't agree with her and mark it down to envy and jealousy is ridiculous. It shows the woman is so arrogant that she thinks if you disagree with her, you are envious of her, because if you didn't disagree with her, you would be on the same side as her, and then you wouldn't be envious of her. It's illogical. It's also the sort of thinking that Meghan possesses. Everybody who isn't agreeing with her is dismissed with an hauteur that is so unsuited for both Katie Couric and Meghan Markle, neither of whom, as I recall, came from a black background of any splendour, although both of them came from backgrounds that were sufficiently privileged that they were able to capitalize upon the advantages that they had. It is so disdainful. It is so contemptuous of anybody who doesn't agree with her. Let me tell you something. If she's on the Aspen Institute, and this is the category of person who's on the Aspen Institute, you Americans better wise up, wake up, and do something about it. You need to get the Aspen Institute to understand that, well, actually, you just need to oppose the Aspen Institute, because for all its pronouncements of virtue, it is clearly malignant and filled with the most malignant personalities who have no good to offer ultimately. How dare she say something like that? I hope I have made it clear how totally unacceptable and illogical and disdainful her line of reasoning is. Frighteningly so, actually. And on that note, I will say thank you very much for listening. I hope this has been of some interest to you. If it has, please keep the questions and comments coming in so I will know what you would like us to be speaking about. Okay, thank you. God bless. And if you have truly enjoyed this, would you care to like, share, subscribe, press the notification bell, and take good care. Bye-bye.